Somebody
Okay,
got it.
Awesome.
Okay.
Sorry, I stepped away from my desk, came back and saw this sign that says start recording.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right. Once again, welcome to the Solidarity Lowell General Meeting of March 24th, 2024. Being recorded. This meeting is being recorded and will be put on YouTube as well as played on LTC. By staying in the meeting, you consent to both. To speak in person, please raise your hand. By Zoom, please use the raise hand function or type star into the chat. Tonight, I am your moderator, Mitchell Pollan. The timekeeper is Chris Offerman. Be mindful of time limits. The stacker is Ryan Hammond. Captions are available. Remember to step up, step back, assume positive intentions. If your words do cause or hurt, and ouch, be accountable. Oops. And please speak slowly. Our agenda for this evening at 5:30, right? Well, no, we'll pass that. Brief attendee intros, land acknowledgement. 5:40, solidarity intro, news and committee updates. 5:50, allied organization updates. 6:10, this is the featured speaker, Chris Hayes of the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, also known as NMCOG. And at 6:55, we'll try to wrap up. So let's get to know you. Introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, where you live, what was your favorite moment so far today. I'll start with the room. Go around the room and then I'll hit our virtual attendees. Chris.
Chris Ackerman, she, her, live in downtown Lowell. My favorite moment thus far, I think coffee and donuts at Tara's pickup event.
Hi, Dan O'Connor, I'm a Dracut resident. I guess my favorite moment today is watching the. I am Joseph Boyle, he, him. I live in the Lowell Highlands. My favorite moment today, after Tara Hong's announcement that he is running for the Democratic nomination for state representative, I took Joe Reddy back to my street and we canvassed my street and collected signatures. Thanks.
Hey.
Chris Hayes, Housing and Economic Development Manager for NMCOG, and I see him. And my favorite moment was I actually have been packing all day because I'm moving soon, so getting packed.
Nice.
Rodosky, she, her, hers. I live in the acre. And I would be another one to say that Tara Hong's announcement this morning was the best part of the day, but since that's been said before, I guess I will say that our online movie club this afternoon had the opportunity to watch Heathers, which was always one of my favorite movies growing up, and it was nice to see it again.
My name is Ryan Hammond. My pronouns are he, him. I live in the acre with Amy Baranowski. And my favorite moment today, because I'm a huge nerd, was looking up Lowell noise codes for noise violations, because I was wondering at the time, why doesn't Lowell have more live, small scale live music venues? And I think that might play into it.
Marissa DuPont, she, her, hers. I live in South Lowell. And my favorite moment today thus far was very specifically Kim's Donuts at Tara Hong's pickup.
All right. So I'll go real quick here. Of course, like I said, my name is Mitchell Pollan. My pronouns are he, him. I live in the acre. My favorite moment so far today was getting a big pile of Cambodian food hit Tamai on Branch Street this afternoon with some folks. All right, now I'm going to be getting the virtual waiting room here. D.
D, you're muted.
You're muted, D. D, you're still muted.
There, I found it. New computer. Well, laptop anyhow. D Halzak, she, her. I live in the acre. My favorite moment today, probably lunch.
All right, Jennifer.
Hi, can you see me? I'm Jennifer Bilella. My pronouns is her, but everyone. And I am from Lowell, live in Lowell still. My favorite moment today, I got to work, was successful, and now I'm home. It's fabulous.
Nice. Excellent. Ron.
Hi, my name is Ron Peastree. My pronouns are he, his, him. I live up near the reservoir in Centerville. And my favorite moment today has not taken place yet because I'm still at work.
All right, Shaw.
Hi, my name's Shaw Yang. He, him, Concord, Massachusetts. My favorite moment, believe it or not, is attending this meeting. You can interpret it any way you want with that.
Excellent. Dylan.
Hi, I'm Dylan, he, him. I used to live in downtown Lowell, but now I live in Melrose. And I guess my favorite moment today was a really good personal training session at the gym.
Excellent. Brent.
Brent Stanfield, they, them. I live in Lowell Highlands. Favorite part of the day is staying inside my warm apartment on this chilly day.
Excellent. John.
John Grossman, he, him. I'm in Lowell on the mighty Merrimack River banks. My favorite moment was having various members of my family come over for a particular family occasion today.
Excellent. Ozzo.
Might be away from this.
All right, AFK for the moment. Let's see, Ron's covered, Chris is covered, Linda Cantor.
Yes, hi. My name is Linda Cantor. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Lowell, downtown Lowell. And I guess my favorite moment today was listening to Moth Story Hour on the radio.
Excellent. Lowell Sun.
Oh, she doesn't have sound, but it's Melanie Gilbert, Lowell Sun, no audio, favorite moment, making brownies.
All right, excellent. Very good. Land acknowledgement. Here in Lowell, we stand on the land of Lowell and Drake. We stand on the land of the following local nations: Wabanaki, Donlin Confederacy, Pennacook, Pentucket, Pawtucket, and Agawam. This information is available from native-land.ca. What is Solidarity Lowell? Solidarity Lowell is a volunteer group of Greater Lowell community members working towards social justice by defending the human rights, dignity, and equality of all against hate and discrimination. We welcome new members. Solidarity Lowell Coordinating Committee is your elected team of volunteers running the meetings, organizing events, disseminating relevant news, and sharing calls to action. Coordinating Committee elections are held in April. Details a bit later in the meeting. Oh, we got all here. Progressive Massachusetts. Well, Solidarity Lowell is a chapter of Progressive Massachusetts, a statewide, member-driven grassroots organization committed to fighting for a vision of shared prosperity, racial and social justice, good government, and economic sustainability in Massachusetts. Visit progressivemass.com or contact us after the meeting to learn more. Some victories. City of Lowell is investing $2 million of American Rescue Plan Act funding for 2 new homeless shelters. Yes. Yeah, that's some good news there. Community Teamwork Incorporated has opened 19 new permanent supportive housing units. Coalition for a Better Acre received a $1 million award from Yield Giving. So I know they've been looking to buy some more property, so that'll help that. $4 million digital equity grant funded broadband and computer literacy classes in Lowell, as well as in Fitchburg and Haverhill. The state Senate has moved to move up to $840 million to the state-run shelter system. Mass Housing and Massachusetts Housing Investment Corporation, MHIC, partnered with a $50 million Equitable Developers Fund, the largest publicly led financing program of its kind. Does anyone else have anything positive they'd like to share?
John Grossman.
John?
Yeah, so many of you know I volunteer with 350 Mass, the climate justice group. And at last week's city council meeting. The city councilors endorsed the plan of the sustainability division of the city sustainability division to re-up the city's electricity supply aggregation program at the same level. And our city supplies electricity to ratepayers who don't opt out. And the program includes purchasing a significant number of renewable energy credits to stimulate demand for renewable energy. And that program is on track to continue for another 3 years, although the contract hasn't been signed yet. The price increase this year is pretty small. It is projected to be small. But there was no opposition to it in the council.
All right. Shaw?
Yeah, I just want to mention that we had a really successful launch of the postcard event at Coffee and Cotton last Wednesday night. And it was such a pleasure to meet everyone there, and looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. All right. Anyone else have anything to add? We good for the moment? All right. Just like to mention, Marie, yeah, you have also arrived as well. If you want to introduce yourself.
Paul Gaudette from Merrimack Valley Project in St. Patrick's Parish in Lowell.
All right. Elections Committee, D.
You're muted.
So, sorry about that. Mute on mute keeps disappearing on my device. We've been trying to organize a meeting with Rodney Elliott and possibly the other legislators for the city at the same time. And if any of you would like to, are constituents of Rodney's and would like to attend, please let us know. Signatures are starting to be collected for nominations, and the various campaigns are looking for volunteers. We encourage you to support any progressive candidates that are running. And we are working now on the endorsement surveys leading up to whether or not we vote to endorse somebody in the fall elections. And we need to decide which races we are endorsing in. So if you're interested, contact us at contact@solidaritylowell.com.
All right, thanks, Dave. Merrimack Valley Interfaith Sanctuary Network. That's Marissa.
Yes, so we have been supporting an asylum seeker named Lillian from the Dominican Republic for quite some time now. She has finally moved into an apartment, which I'm very excited about. And she can use assistance with furnishing the place. So, you know, there are any donations, gift cards are appreciated. As usual, you can give them to me or Cash App or Venmo. My usernames are online there. Or checks and cash. You can just email me, marissa@solidaritylowell.com to coordinate drop off.
Great. Unpacking Whiteness, Marissa.
Yes, okay, so Unpacking Whiteness Dialogue Group is a 5-week course-ish. It's not really a course, it's a discussion group. Where we explore racial biases, white supremacy, white privilege, explicit and implicit bias, systemic racism, and microaggressions. These are supportive, structured dialogues. And it, like I said, 5 sessions, it's capped at 10 people. And after attending that, you're invited to join the ongoing group, which meets once a month. And we alternate between discussing a book or watching a film. And you can sign up at bit.ly/UW-signup or email me.
All right, thank you. Rapid Response Team, back to D.
Okay, there's a hearing on Tuesday at 10 o'clock that includes the bill that authorizes the state auditor to audit the legislature. And it's in room A2. It's too late to sign up to give oral testimony. but you can still submit written testimony up until March 30th at 5 p.m. If you'd like to help with the RRT newsletter or have an item you'd like to include, just email rrt@solidaritylowell.com.
All right, thank you, Dee.
There's another item following this. Yeah. So access to counsel. This is the bill that would help ensure that people facing housing court eviction hearings have access to counsel, and it includes funding for that. Because most landlords who go to eviction to housing court have representation. Most tenants do not, yet most tenants who do manage to secure representation manage to avoid eviction. So it's really important. And this is in the Joint Ways and Means Committee, because the piece that's important is funding the whole thing. And so if anybody would like to write in support of access to counsel, we encourage you to do that. I'd also like you to know that Vanna Howard is on the committee, so it's really important to let her know where you stand on the issue. And there is a wording to it that was too long to put on a slide, but will be in the next RRT for your message. Okay, that's it.
Upcoming events, the 8th Annual Sustainable Lowell Awards, with Lowell Litter Crew being recognized. Well, it'll be at the City Council meeting on Tuesday, March 26th at 6:30 p.m. at City Hall Council Chambers. Immigrants Day at the State House, Tuesday, March 28th. Thursday, March 28th, 9 a.m. RSVP link is in the RRT. Hunger and Homelessness Commission monthly meeting, a Wednesday, April 3rd at 12 p.m. Virtual meeting link in the RRT. Emergency Housing Coalition, next meeting is Sunday, April 7th, 6 p.m. at the UMass Lowell Center for Women in Work on 150 Wilder Street. Progressive Mass Gala fundraiser, which will be honoring, among others, Lowell representative Vanna Howard. This is Sunday, April 28th at 7 p.m. It's virtual. Tickets are $35. More details and additional events are in the RRT. DD&D, let's go over to Ryan.
We just held a demonstrate, dine, and discuss last Friday. 2 Fridays ago, where we discussed we protested in favor of more affordable housing and for raising awareness about the homeless crisis in Lowell. We will hold another one again in 2 months. What was the date we talked about?
Friday, May 10th.
Friday, May 10th at 6 p.m. in front of the Ladd and Whitney Memorial. Most likely we'll again be protesting in demand for affordable housing and for more homeless shelters, and for more action to be taken by city council and also the state government to address the housing crisis and home insecurity. We have not yet chosen a restaurant for it.
All right, you can contact Ryan at solidaritylowell.com. Mill City messaging, Amy?
Yeah, so like Shaw said, some help from him and Christine from Indivisible. Our postcarding socials are back last Wednesday. It was a good time, a great way to kick it off. We're hoping to do it once a month. So the details are still being worked out. It was a little awkward being at Coffee and Cotton specifically on a Wednesday night because they have open mic nights and it got a little loud / there were some serious movements out there and we'll be being too loud for them and who knows. And anyway, so still working out a final details of where and when, but please, if you want to get involved, contact me at amy@solidaritylowell.com or look for the upcoming dates in the RRT. We'll probably have another one in
All right. Coordinating committee elections. The SLCC has a total of 10 seats. 3 members are in the middle of their term, which means there are 7 available spots, excuse me. It's a 2-year term. Expected responsibilities include 2 additional meetings per month, basically one on either side of meetings. Daily review and input on a Discord server, and complete list of responsibilities is also listed in the bylaws. There are 3 incumbents running for re-election: Joe Boyle, D. Halzak, and Chris Offerman. So that means what? We've got 4 spots that are open?
I think it says there. somewhere.
Yeah, it's because we've got 7 spots.
7 available. spots.
Yep. Floor is open to nominations, yourself or someone else. They can be submitted to contact@solidaritylowell.com. The April meeting will have candidate intros followed by online voting. Allied group updates and announcements. Please share any important information and upcoming events, groups that you are involved in. Anyone have any commentary? I'll just mention real quick that the Lowell Democratic City Committee will be having its reorganization meeting after the March election of the committee memberships. It's on April 8th. Location will probably be the East End Club, although it might change. Anyone who is not elected that day can be elected to the many vacancies that still exist on the committee. And we will also be holding committee officer elections that day.
John Grossman?
Yeah, I have 2 updates and announcements. One on the 350 Mass Climate Front. There is a major campaign to stop the expansion of private jet service at Hanscom Air Force Base in Bedford. Private jets, as it turns out, emit a tremendous amount of greenhouse gases, much more than you might think, and have a significant impact on climate change. And they want to have more of them at Hanscom Air Force Base. And there's a campaign to stop that from happening. And the campaign is quite sensitive to the fact that we don't want simply to move the problem to some other location, but we want to take steps with an eye towards reducing the use of private jets. As they say, it's a luxury the climate can't afford. If you're interested in getting involved with it, put a link in the chat. And if you're in person, if you just go to stopprivatejetexpansion.org, you can find out about it. And the second update is from the other thing I do, which is I work for the Service Employees International Union, Local 509. And a bargaining unit of 3,000 graduate student workers at Boston University is going on strike tomorrow morning. It's an historic event. It's a huge bargaining unit. There hasn't been a strike at Boston University in many, many years. And I urge you to follow it, participate. There's a rally at noontime. If anybody happens to be in Boston, with nothing to do with noontime tomorrow at Marsh Plaza, but more importantly, just stay alert to it. No doubt there are some folks from the area that are a part of it.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep, never mind.
Oh, anyone else? Good.
All right.
All right. All right, on to our featured main event this evening. Chris Hayes, Housing and Economic Development Manager. Chris has been with NMCOG since October 21. Chris oversees the housing and development team and provides direct technical assistance on housing, economic development, and land use projects. Chris represents NMCOG on the some cutoff there. Common Ground Development Corporation and the Greater Lowell Mass Hire Workforce Board. Chris received a master's in regional planning at Cornell University. Co-founder of Lowell DIY Lowell and Lowell Votes, and serves on the boards of the Bush Art Gallery and DIY Lowell as certified planner with the American Institute of Certified Planners, AICP. If you have any questions for him, please type questions in the chat or raise your hand when the time comes. And I'm going to turn this over to
Yeah, you gotta stop sharing now.
I'm going to turn this over to Chris. I'm going to stop sharing.
Do you mind if I stand up?
The coffee?
Yes.
Up there, the third button where it says stop share. You go, there was, lovely.
Okay,
And now highlight the page. Why is John Grossman highlighted?
Because he's the last one.
he was the last person who spoke. Yeah, give me 1 second, guys. All right, cool.
There we go.
Okay. Okay, now you can hide that, right? Oh, what?
Oh,
Oh.
no,
Is that not working?
all right, sorry, guys.
No, go back to that one, yeah.
All right.
So I am Chris Hayes, Housing and Development Manager for Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. And thank you so much for inviting me to talk about At Home in Greater Lowell, which is our regional plan that we're going over the course of the year to address the housing challenges in the region. Some of you might have known, we did a kickoff summit a week ago. We had over 80 people come and at least one person from each of the towns in NMCOG, but I'm going to keep saying NMCOG, so I better explain what NMCOG is before I go any further, which is something that nobody really understands very well. All of the municipalities in Massachusetts belong to a regional planning agency. And NMCOG is the one that represents the towns you see on the map. Basically Lowell and its immediate abutters and a couple of towns to the west, Dunstable, Pepperell, westward. And, you know, you can think of us as kind of two things. One is to help the communities collaborate on important projects and work together on them. And the second is we're almost a free consultant. The communities are our boss. Our council that leads us is made up by representatives from each community, including a select board member, a planning board member, and an alternate. And, or in the case of Lowell, city council member. There are bosses, and we kind of provide planning services for them, help build capacity, help grow them. And what we're doing as part of it at Home in Greater Lowell is facilitating community outreach, facilitating summits, and really pulling together data from consultants and from the towns together to create this plan, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Because first of all, I wanted to start out with, why did we decide to create a regional housing strategy? Okay. Is everything okay?
Yeah.
So, housing is a top priority in our region. Housing has emerged as a top issue throughout NMCOG's work in each of our communities and in regional discussions. A lot of what I do at NMCOG is work with towns on local housing production plans, which are a required type of plan that identifies different strategies to build generally affordable housing, subsidized housing for certain income groups. But we've seen it as a priority in not just those conversations, but also when you just kind of go around to communities and talk from the leadership to residents, they cite housing as a major concern. And I kind of see that here too. Many of your agenda items were about housing. And you might know about MBTA communities requirement, which is a multifamily requirement that all communities that are adjacent to a transit stop or have a transit stop must include some multifamily housing by right. We see also actually it show up in various ways, including regional homelessness and housing insecure. Staffing shortages, especially among our municipalities, they're having a hard time attracting people. They have to pay a pretty high wage to offset the high cost of living that's driven mostly by housing costs. And we see that in the private industry as well. And we see folks leaving Massachusetts mostly because of high housing costs. And so really, we're seeing it both from the economic development side, that folks are worried about the economic trajectory of Massachusetts, and of course, the humanitarian side, worried about the homelessness crisis. So we've also looked at some data preliminarily, and it really does, it's not just anecdotal, it really does show up in the data. So first of all, projections provided by people that are smarter than me, statewide, are projecting Lowell, Greater Lowell, to increase in households. And that assumes current trends, current zoning, etc. And as those households are increasing, they're projected to get smaller as well. As more people live alone, families get smaller, etc. So we're really seeing that we really do need more housing units, but also different types of housing units. And we don't have them. Our vacancy rates are low in Greater Lowell. And whenever I say Greater Lowell, it's those 9 communities that you saw on the map. Greater Lowell has lower vacancy rates than Massachusetts on average. Definitely lower rates than the United States on average. And what we say is a healthy market is generally about 2% for sales units, 8% for rental units. So we're roughly half of that. So we do know that macro, there is a housing shortage. And we know this question, housing costs up. This is not a surprise to anybody, but just to put the scale of the problem in the last 10 years, our average wages have risen by about 10%. Median income has risen by about 10%, inflation adjusted. But average rents are about 20% up from where they were 10 years ago, inflation adjusted. And the cost of a house is 50% up. And so we also are saying that, so these costs are basically out of reach of so many people. So you see a bunch of dots there. The farther to the right the dot is, the more people work in that industry. So healthcare and social assistance is by far our largest industry here in Greater Lowell. And the average wage that pays does not provide enough money for the median household rents to be, median rents to be affordable. When we say affordable, we're using that 30%. People should pay 30% or less of their income on housing. And even some of our best paying fields like construction don't pay the average wage enough to afford the median sales home. And of course, and I think I'm not surprising anybody here, the burden really does fall on the most vulnerable. We've got almost a third of folks who are cost burdened. And so again, that's basically paying more than that 30%. And 15%, that's 14.9%. In our region that are severely cost burdened, paying more than half their income on housing costs. And most of those are extremely low income folks. So, I always say, I love the metaphor of musical chairs. There's only so many houses. The people with the most money get the houses, and the people with the least money kind of get squeezed out of the musical chairs. NMCOG region has slightly fewer rental opportunities by proportion than the state as a whole. And you can look at that as a plus or a minus, because that means a lot of people have ownership opportunities, but that also means that there's not as many opportunities for folks who have less money. But this really does have a disproportionate burden on people of color. In our region, Black folks, Hispanic or Latino or Latina folks, or folks who don't identify generally as white or Asian, tend to rent in higher proportions. And this creates two challenges. One is the way the economy is set up, we all know this. Owning a house is a wealth building opportunity. Folks who rent are locked out of that rent building opportunity. But also because we have undistributed rental opportunities, that blocks folks from certain communities. So the red is where you see 60% or more is rentals. And then the lightest of green is 0 to 20%. And I'll tell you, it's generally close to 0%. And the rental opportunities aren't just not distributed evenly in our region. They're concentrated in Lowell, obviously, but they're concentrated in central Lowell. So even certain neighborhoods are locked out from rentals. Mm-hmm. And then you can see, this is a map of people who identify as non-white or Hispanic or Latino or Latina. And it maps very closely to the rental opportunities. So again, there's a real fair housing concern when we are locking out different populations from communities. So my summary is Greater Lowell is in need of solutions at local and regional levels. And we have this door theme because we want to create more front doors for more folks. And we think that a regional strategy to coordinate the work and taking action together will be the strongest response for this. So what is the Greater Lowell, at home in Greater Lowell plan, like quote unquote plan? Well, we talk about it as 3 pieces. Number 1 is data and strategy. So the type of data I was showing, along with hopefully getting more into the weeds, really understand or drink it, which is suburban and kind of lower middle. So each of these communities is all going to have various different strategies. Second, we're going to have a storytelling campaign. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on a future slide, but it's a really unique element to elevate the stories of folks on kind of both sides of the housing issue, people who provide housing and people who need housing. And then finally, we really don't want this to be another plan that just kind of sits on the shelf and, you know, people complain that no, it's not. No, so we're going to be developing a municipal toolkit so that communities can hit the ground running. And that toolkit might have things like model zoning or model bylaws or policies. It might have public education campaigns, because we all know that most of these strategies have to either get past town meeting or get past city council in the city of Lowell. And it might include some other elements, but basically it's to help the communities actually enact the strategies that are recommended. It'll take place throughout 2024. I described the summit that kicked off in March a couple of weeks ago. And in June, we're going to have another summit. So in March, we started discussing what are the goals, what are the research questions, what do we need to learn, and what's our vision. In June, we'll have another one where we'll come back and say, this is what we learned. You asked us to look into this. This is what we've learned. Now, what are the strategies to reach these goals? And these kind of summits draw together both experts like nonprofits. We try to get elected officials. We try to get people at local, state, and federal levels. So we really try to get everybody that's in the housing mix and interested advocates and members of the public all together to talk about how to address these challenges in a holistic way. I know there's a lot of strategies that are going out there right now, a lot of things. I saw the housing bond bill mentioned, and that's an incredibly important element. But how do we get all of these things together in a unified strategy? And that's what we want to talk about. The storytelling will be going on throughout the summer and fall. We're hoping to have a final summit in the fall and complete it by the end of this year so that we can kind of, again, hit the ground running. And that final summit is the hit the ground running part. It's going to be, here are the strategies. Who's going to do what? Let's start. And I want to say I'm pretty proud or pretty happy. You know, all of the municipalities are partners. Now, certainly the rubber's going to hit the road when we hit details, but all 9 of the communities signed letters of support stating that they do believe in the strategy process, that they're going to communicate regularly, they're sharing outreach materials, they're providing feedback. All communities at least have 1 representative at that summit. We're going to try and get that to at least all communities having 2 or 3, so that we really have buy-in at the municipal level, because we know that's really what we need. We have to have it all happening in the city of Lowell, all happening in Westford. And just to kind of summarize what the kind of big picture is, We want to move housing discussions into an equity and fair housing framework. We want to connect housing goals with those economic development goals, and that means that sometimes is what moves people. Identify and advocate for the resources communities need to meet housing type of production goals. So that means that if infrastructure is needed, if sewer or water is needed, that we're advocating at the state level for those elements in a unified way. And we want to find unique roles for the communities to play. I just have a couple slides left, talking about what's next and what I'd love to talk about. And then, yeah, I really want to do questions, answers, thoughts, suggestions, whatever. But the things that people can do right now, number one is the simplest one, is join our mailing list. We've got QR code that I'm showing right now, but you can also just visit NMCOG.org/AHTL for At Home Greater Lowell. So NMCOG.org AHTL and click on sign up to join our mailing list to join the mailing list. I would love for everybody to take the survey. We haven't email blasted it out yet, but it is available for everybody. And it's basically asking all those questions we asked at that last summit for people who didn't make it to the summit. We want to get as many responses from different types of people, different backgrounds as possible. And also for people who might be interested in attending the next one, what's the best block of time? Evening, day, Friday, Monday, whatever. Again, there's a link, there's a QR code, but there's also a link from that website. I teased this a little bit, but Home is Everything is going to be the storytelling campaign. And Stellar Story Company, I don't know if anybody knows them, Cheryl Hamilton, she used to work with International Institute, and that's how Suitcase Stories started. You know about Suitcase Stories? And so what we're trying to do is start a campaign, and it's going to be short at first because we have funding for 6 months, but a campaign to promote the stories and challenges and successes in housing, like I mentioned, from both sides. Maybe it's in-person events, maybe it's social media, traditional media. We don't know what it's going to look like yet, but we do know that we want it to be diverse people on both sides of the housing system with a goal of, there's actually a few goals. One is so that we better understand how policies play out on the ground, so that when we're making recommendations, we really understand the texture of how these things play out on the ground. But also, perhaps even more importantly, for the public to kind of understand how the policies play out on the ground and how their decisions and their votes at town meeting or their letters to their select board members really impact people in positive and negative ways, really get people to start thinking about the holistic housing system that they're participating in. So there was supposed to be a link here because we have another survey, but I couldn't find a link. So please email me, chayes@nimcog.org, if any of this intrigues you and you either want to tell your story or you have a connection to storytellers, especially diverse folks, and I mean diverse in any way imaginable. And then finally, one last thing. This is in its beginning stages, but we've heard from several folks that they kind of want a housing 101. They want to understand, you know, sometimes we say something like 40B comprehensive permit, or we say the housing bond bill, or we say MBTA communities, and not everybody knows what all those things mean. And they certainly don't know what's at the state level, what's at the local level, what's at the. So what we're starting to think about putting together is maybe partnering with a nonprofit and starting to think about a workshop to teach folks about the local, state, and federal laws that shape their housing. Details are being finalized, and so that's why, again, if it intrigues you, email me, and you might have some ideas, and we might be able to work together on what this Housing 101 workshop looks like. I want to stress it's not Housing 101 like I need a house, how do I get one? It's I'm an advocate or I'm a resident who wants to know how I'm supposed to vote, how I'm supposed to, you know, understand this jargon, if you will. And that's it. So that's my dog and pony show.
Chris, can you share those slides with us?
Yeah, those are fantastic.
Yes, they're actually, if you go to that website that I've mentioned a few times, there's something that says, see the slideshow from the summit.
Oh, great.
It's slightly different because I had the wet next slides added, but the one from the summit has a lot more information as well, so.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Dylan, did you have a question?
If anybody has something to add.
Yeah, I'm gonna go fix that.
I'm looking and I don't, he's not unmuted.
I saw John Grossman's hand also up and waving earlier.
Dee has hand up.
Okay. Dee?
Aren't other people ahead of me? I thought you mentioned a couple of names.
Thought so, but maybe I'm wrong.
Just go, Dee, it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, oh, so this is, your presentation was mostly about housing, and that's important. But the other piece of that is the people who aren't housed. And we see conflict between the towns in the region that your organization covers, where the city says they're sending all their unhoused people here and they're expecting us to take responsibility for them. Is there any way that the regional organizations can organize to deal with homelessness on a regional level to make sure that the responsibilities and the funding are distributed more equitably?
Yeah, it's a good point, a good question. So, I have two answers for this. One is the regional housing process was to start to break down that city versus suburbs or suburbs versus you're not doing enough, you're not doing enough, and to start really saying, look, we all know that we have a problem, let's work together to solve them. So that will be part of this process, is really thinking about it. The housing, at the housing summit, we actually broke into 4 groups. One of them was what we call development, and it was talking about zoning and basically more housing production. With the idea of musical chairs, we don't have enough chairs. The lower people are always going to get pushed off of the chairs if we don't have enough chairs. The second was affordable housing. A lot of people target, and I'm not going to start using jargon, but 80% area median income is the most common place for a level for affordable housing. We know that probably needs to be lower because people who make almost the median income can often find a rental, but people who make, who are working retail or something like that, they can't participate in the market very well. And so there needs to be more deeply subsidized housing. And then the third group that broke out and talked about goals and vision were homelessness and unhoused populations. And a lot of the conversation we had there was specifically about the state and federal laws that made it very onerous to help folks and to build shelter housing and permanent supportive housing, and some of the other challenges to building those types of housing, and the need to build that housing not just in central Lowell, but in other neighborhoods in Lowell and other communities, so that it's evenly distributed throughout the region. So even though I didn't really focus on it on my presentation, that is an important part of the plan. And I think it needs to be a conversation, yeah. But although one thing I have to say is when we talk to homelessness providers and they're like, okay, what's the number one thing needs to change to help folks suffer, housing insecure folks and folks who are unsheltered, they're like, no more housing, more houses. I don't care what, we just need more houses because it's so hard to get from shelter to any type of, there's a small group that really need a lot of support, but then there's a much larger group that just need cheap housing. So that's what we've heard, and so that's why we prioritize that more housing message, but we know it's not the only piece. And it's a long-term solution, and we need solutions now, like emergency shelter.
All right, John, do you have your hand up?
I don't think I have my hand up, but I have a question. It's always a good bet. I guess, 2 questions. One small one, which is what's the relationship between the NMCOG game plan and the city of Lowell's master plan? And the second question, which is how do you, on the one hand, create more housing opportunities, and on the other hand, avoid gentrification?
So the small question, I mentioned the local housing plans that NMCOG worked on. So NMCOG actually worked on the local housing plan for Lowell that is going to be part of, like the Lowell Forward Plan got released for comment a few months ago. The Lowell Housing Plan, that's kind of a sister document to that, will be released in a month or two. And they speak to one another, they're part of one another. That said, more communication from the city for its plans, its hopes, UMass Lowell for its plans. More communication is always better so that people understand what they're doing. A lot of people are doing a lot of good work, but almost in separate silos. So we're trying to capture more and more of that in the plan. And I don't know if we've gotten there yet. And then making sure that the plans really are front and center in mind of the city council, so that each year they aren't thinking about, a different strategy that they just heard about, but really try to work on some goals that everybody agrees on. So that is something that the regional housing strategy will definitely take into account local plans, and local plans are being worked on for Lowell. But all of that depends on good communication. Then the second question, it's a really good question. I think a lot of people have different ideas. There are definitely kind of a camp of young people that say, it doesn't matter, we just need more housing. It's a supply and demand problem. And I think over the very long term and over a large geographic area, say Greater Boston, that's absolutely true. Like Greater Boston just doesn't have enough housing, and over the long term, if you build more, things will come cheaper. But to me, there's another piece of that, which is local displacement and the fact that, for example, Westford's median rents has actually increased by quite a bit since it's been building a ton of apartments. That's because there's a lot of brand new apartments. As those apartments get older, they're going to become more what we call naturally affordable, i.e. just cheaper, because they're old. And that will become really great housing stock. But in the short term, the median rent actually went up because they're all new. That doesn't necessarily mean that, and potentially some other apartments could, we don't have the micro data on this. Maybe they rose rents in response to that. Maybe we don't. They did. We don't know. So I know that's basically just saying, you're right, that's a tough question, is basically what I just said. But hopefully I'm acknowledging that we do acknowledge the problem, but there's not a great solution that we have for it, other than fighting for more subsidized housing. That's kind of a short-term solution. It's not a great long-term solution. We can't hang our hat on it because the problem is too big for subsidized housing alone. But for example, that's why the housing bond bill to increase the amount of money for subsidized housing is important. And right now it takes, I'm rambling, but I'll finish here. It takes probably 3 years just to get a commitment through the One Stop for Housing, which is how most of the money for the subsidized housing comes, is from the state's various pools of money that they kind of pull it together and say it's One Stop, because you apply for it once instead of applying for 5 different pots of money. But I've heard there's a rule that, generally speaking, that they will never say yes for the first year. You have to do it 2 years in a row for them to actually say yes. And then sometimes they provide some conditions. It takes a while for that money to get there. So that makes the development horizon for these affordable projects really long. The nonprofits have trouble holding on to the property for that long if they're going through that process, because they have to control the property from the point that they apply to the point that they're building. And during that time, they're not making any, well, they don't make money off of it, but they aren't getting revenue to offset their costs. And so we see a lot of different potential solutions, that some of which we can control at the local level, like allowing people to build affordable housing when they come in with 40 units, not saying, can you do 20 instead? So that's on the local side that we can control, but then there's a whole nother state side that we need to advocate for.
Ron Peastry?
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so this is going to wander a little bit, and I apologize. One of the things that I've been noticing in all of these various social justice conversations is siloing both in scale and in time boxes. And a lot of these problems have lots and lots of interactions with other things, and I don't believe we can really truly attack them effectively unless we start dealing with them in a more holistic fashion. For instance, housing, we've got three basic timescales we need to deal with. We've got exigent circumstances. We've literally got people who are in danger of being frozen to death or dying of exposure because they don't have housing. We've also got short-term issues where people who are living paycheck to paycheck are basically priced out of any place reasonable. And then that map that you showed that showed how many people are renting and how many people are people of color versus how many people who own homes and where they are. Boy, did that look like a map of redlining from the 1950s to me. So whether we've got the laws back in place for redlining or not, we've de facto created a socioeconomic status of redlining. That's not going to be fixable at the municipal level. That's going to require multiple communities to work together, and probably the governor's office to be involved in making sure that all of the towns play fair and play nicely with each other. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of stuff here that needs an overall planned approach that's holistic in nature. And so the question I've got for you, Chris, is who's talking to Maura Healy and the other people at the appropriate scale to attempt to put together something that looks at it and says housing is a minimum wage problem, because if wages aren't good, people are going to get priced out of the market no matter what. Housing is a representation problem, because if towns that are mostly white and affluent simply refuse to allow rental units to be built, then the only places that are going to have them are the poor, densely populated areas. And we've got to you see where I'm going? We need a holistic approach, and I don't know how or what is being done to attempt to pursue that. And I apologize for wandering all over and asking this question.
I think you summarized it very well. And I will say NMCOG is in touch with the secretariat, the new Secretary of Housing and Livable Communities. As a first step toward that, representative came to the summit, we chatted, we're hoping to have more conversations. To your point of it being holistic and not just about housing, it is about transportation, we know, and it is about infrastructure, it is about schools and equity in schools and making sure urban schools are funded as well as suburban schools. It's a lot of things, yeah, definitely. And I think the governor is doing a really good job at trying to pull those together. Personally, at least compared to previous administrations. But it is a conversation. I will say, going back to MBTA communities, though, when you're saying, it has to be at state level, and it does, but a relatively MBTA communities is we believe relatively modest. It's not going to create the number of housing units that we think is required. There's at least some loopholes where you can definitely put some of those zoning districts that require multifamily in places where new buildings can't be built. Generally trying to get away from, we're generally trying to really make sure that communities get away from that, but there are things. And it only impacts 1% of most communities' land area. So that really is a huge change. And yet, at least in some municipalities, it's people are ready to burn down the state house because of it. People are very, very incensed at any type of change for the community. And so I think, and politicians respond to people, but also politicians need to be leaders. So we're really trying to think of the ways that we can, at a local and regional level, change hearts and minds in both directions, both from the populace, kind of understanding that these changes might be helpful and be good for the communities. And also for the politicians to make sure they're standing up and leading and knowing that we will have to have more state laws like the MBTA community to really address, like you said, some of the equity across town borders. Probably outside the range of this plan. This plan is like starting the conversation. It's finding different ways that we can do it local, regional. But I hope that it's the first, I could say the first salvo, but that's kind of war language on this. But the first big effort to really have our region speak as a whole to the state at some of the needs.
I have no problem with a war on poverty instead of a war on the poor.
Joe? So Chris, I'm a regional planner too. And what I'm concerned about is that you made a comment before about there can be localized effects. What I'm concerned about is you work here in Merrimack Valley, I work in North Central Massachusetts, and I'm concerned that the state and Boston are looking at our regions as their safety valves for their housing crises. And that, we're being charged with doing the work to address the housing shortages that exist within these regions. But what's being done to help address the housing shortages in these regions is going to be swamped by the influx of people from the much larger greater Boston region.
I certainly can't speak for North Central Massachusetts, it's a bit farther out. Greater Lowell is within the labor shed of, take a step back. I went to a conversation with somebody and they said, why is this a housing crisis now? You're just making this up. Why is it like we're fine and then all of a sudden just now we're in a housing crisis? Maybe it is just Boston, maybe it is. And I have to push back and say the Massachusetts miracle back in the 90s, 80s and 90s was centered around the 495. It's a lot of office parks that the communities were very happy to receive at the time because they meant really a change from kind of the downward economic spiral I understand before my time, but I understand Massachusetts was in, and kind of creating this high-tech industry that has lots of great paying jobs and creates lots of opportunities for folks that are living here. And then the houses started getting built and communities passed a bunch of restrictive zoning to try and slow down the houses being built that were the houses for people on the 495. So I think at least in our region, that is a consequence of not just Boston, but the jobs that are in Greater Boston and we're part of Greater Boston here in Greater Lowell. Western Massachusetts, and you're kind of in the middle in North Central, but Western Massachusetts, I think, has a totally different set of problems. And I haven't heard much from the governor's office that they're like, I've heard some people say, Western Massachusetts is kind of like economically depressed and we need more people to move out here and let's get them out here. But I haven't really heard that much as a strategy, mostly because the jobs are in Eastern Massachusetts, so.
Mitchell? Yeah, I was just gonna ask, like, my understanding is that Western Massachusetts has generally got a population, and it has the opposite problem with Eastern Massachusetts. There's not enough housing, and Western Massachusetts is going to have more houses than they need in the near future because there's no reason for people to live in some places, like, like Pittsfield, for example. That's, I don't know, does that seem to be like your impression of that is if they almost have an opposite problem?
That's my impression. Now, I'm really just focused on our area and know that we're part of a larger area, and so we do have to have those conversations, but my expertise is really in.
Okay.
But yeah, that's my impression.
Okay.
Paul, is there any discussion about changing either zoning laws or just being creative to say that we need more small opportunities. In other words, studio apartments or single room occupancy development. So that it's like the first threshold of getting off the sidewalk is to get into something that's very small, very compact, but affordable. And is there, I imagine developers are saying there's no money in it, which is why government would have to support it and show initiative.
So this is anecdotal, but most of the folks that I talk to on the street that live rough, that live unsheltered, or sheltered, have often said, well, I used to live in boarding house X, but that got shut down for code violations. Or I used to live in a neighborhood that was kind of down and out, and not get knocked down or do. So we really do see a lot of folks that are hitting the streets now that we're able to pay a low rent to kind of maybe substandard housing, but with a roof over their heads. And that's disappearing. It's a recommendation in the city of Lowell's housing plan. I can say that, at least the draft plan, to do a zoning audit to see if the zoning in Lowell restricts that. It will be an interesting conversation in other communities because, of course, other communities might play a role as well. Especially those that are connected to transit or have other kind of opportunities, because folks who live in single occupancy housing often don't have a car. So that's part of it is, but there are communities on transit. So we haven't had that conversation in the other communities, but I'm sure we will. But in the city of Lowell, that's absolutely something that's being thought of and investigated. The other piece of that is it's not really addressing the folks who are housing insecure. But actually, apparently micro units are what is getting sold in Lowell now, what we rented out really quickly, which is really small units that have nice fixings, nice amenities, but they're really small and therefore affordable to, let's say, a young professional or something like that. And that's something that I think all the communities need to consider as well, because again, I keep going back to musical chairs. Those young professionals will occupy different apartments and things that could be occupied, that might be too big for them, that could occupy a family that really needs it. So we're trying on all of the above strategy.
Ron Peastree.
So we've been discussing the need to increase supply. One of the things that I'm hearing about a lot is since COVID, average commercial office occupation, occupy, whatever, is between 1/3 and 1/2. So we've got nationwide $1.7 trillion worth of commercial real estate. They're sitting empty at the moment. And here in Massachusetts, we've got 1.5 tons. Admittedly, it's out in the 128, 495 belt where most of the businesses are, or it's scattered in other places where the businesses are. But pretty much all the commercial real estate around us is only between 1/2 and 1/3 and 1/2 occupied. And that's an awful lot of potential space that admittedly needs to get converted. And there's issues with that. I'm not dodging those, but still it's space that's much easier to put into housing than building from scratch. Is there anything being done to pursue this?
Yeah, so specifically in Westford, the MBTA community zone has been developed specifically for not necessarily empty buildings, but empty lots that were primarily going to be expansions of office parks. And they know those expansions aren't going to happen anymore. And the land developers are very interested in allowing multifamily in the areas and creating more mixed use where they continue operating their offices, but also they have, homes nearby. And that plays out a little bit differently in the city of Lowell, where what they're looking at specifically are the upper stories of, downtown buildings, which are generally have not been occupied by offices for quite a while because they have the same difficulties as offices as they would with housing. And how could that be incentivized? How could those challenges be overcome? Like, for example, elevators that might be shared for multiple buildings. So those are the two big conversations I'm hearing. You hit the nail on the head though, that like, a lot of the office parks, it's really hard to change a modern office building with really giant floor plates into housing because you've got these big central corridors that don't have windows. So, that's gonna be a challenge. And also, again, just trying to get the communities that are not Westford or Lowell, on board with the idea that, more homes and more apartments would not be detrimental to the fabric of their community.
Joe?
Do we have any dead malls in the region, or dead or dying malls? Shopping malls. Yeah, shopping
Yeah.
malls. Out where I work in Leominster, the former Sears Town Mall, now known as the Whitney Square Mall, is definitely on the decline, and there's buzz starting there about a redevelopment that would bring a whole bunch of residential in to turn it into a mixed use type development. That type of thing could have huge potential for huge numbers of units. But I don't think we really have dead malls up there.
There aren't really malls, period.
Because they jumped us to go up to Nashua.
Yeah.
There's Nashua, there's Burlington, and then there's Lawrence.
Yeah.
So,
Salem
And
specifically, again, over the New
Yeah.
Hampshire, yeah.
It's a Marlboro.
yeah, Marlboro.
Yeah, so yeah, we do have strip malls, but they generally are still doing okay.
Yeah, they're okay.
Yeah, they're still generally still doing okay. Even, there's some like lower value ones, but those tend to be mostly fully occupied and offer opportunities for small local businesses. So
Yeah.
there's not as much retail commercial space. There are a lot of empty lots zoned for that, and it's probably not gonna get built. So that's really where the conversation is, can we rezone those things that the city really, or the town, really wanted to be another strip mall, but it's probably not gonna happen.
John Grossman?
Yeah, here's a vote for the Housing 101 class. If you want to do it, that's a great idea. Thank you for that idea. And then a question is, what do you think about rent control as part of the answer?
I get asked that a lot, and I will say that I've read a lot of research. Sometimes rent control has solved a lot of problems, and sometimes it's caused a lot of problems. So I think it's really market specific in terms of how effective it is, because the balance is in a very hot market, you can do rent control and they'll still keep building because it's just, and maybe that's where we are right now. In maybe a cooler market, you can do rent control and they'll just stop building, and therefore you've got the musical chairs problem. And I don't know what this market is. Our recommendation in the Lowell housing plan, and I could say this again as a draft, was that Lowell should keep it in mind if it's ever made to be legal in Massachusetts, but right now you need a home rule petition that has a lot of questions on whether it would move forward or not. And there are other solutions that require less risk in terms of whether it passed or not legislatively. And so, regardless of whether rent control is a good idea or not, you'd have to get a successful home rule petition. The odds of that don't look very good right now. That doesn't mean it's a bad idea, and we shouldn't be advocating for allowing communities to do that. I would love a market study on that to see what kind of market would be, and whether that would be of value or not. Because again, I think when rent control was in Boston, the research was that it actually helped, but in California, they think it hurt. So it's complicated.
Yeah, like I was just mentioning, like I was heard, it was tried like in a city in Minnesota recently, and it ended up causing the problem that you mentioned, where new housing construction stopped because it hurt the market for it. And as a result, costs were controlled by it, but the underlying problem wasn't solved. So.
D?
Yeah, one more, and then this would wrap it up.
Yeah. One more question.
D, you're muted.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't find the thing again. About the the malls, reusing malls. So a few years ago, Bill Ricca had a proposal to turn the mall in the center of town to a mixed use development, and it didn't fly. And are people more open to doing that kind of thing now because of the housing crisis? Or do we still see resistance to mixed use developments?
See resistance to housing development of all types. A good counter example though is Kingsborough. They propose, and again, town meetings haven't happened yet, so we don't know if it's going to be approved by the voters or not. But they seem to have a lot of support for their proposal to allow multifamily basically right next to the Pheasant Lane Mall, because it's based like there's a parking lot of the Pheasant Lane Mall literally in Kingsborough. And so they have zoned, or they have proposed zoning for a town meeting that would include building apartments there to create a kind of a mixed use area next to the mall over there. So there are some towns that seems to be palatable, and some towns that might still be resistant to that idea. I think Billerica probably is one of the resistant ones, but I don't really want to speak for them.
If I could just add something on this, I remember back when I worked for the city in the 2000s, there was a lot of resistance up and including members of the city council to rezoning Jackson Street away from industrial zoning. Because, what if we can get some industry back in there? There was no chance of getting industry back in those multi-story mills. But as late as the 21st century, there was still people making that fight. So I can imagine a lot of these towns not letting their commercial industrial zoning go very easily.
And I will say the towns are all in fiscal crisis right now because of the combination of Prop 2.5 and high inflation. And the ones that have a larger commercial base are doing a lot better than the ones that don't have a large commercial base. So when you're in town hall, the thinking of that is very clear to you that Drake is a great example. It's got a much smaller commercial base it's got fewer jobs per population. It's a bedroom community, and it's had some of the most trouble with its fiscal overrides and things. So it's a very real consideration, and that's part of what we're thinking about when we're thinking about the housing plan is how the government can continue to function and be functional, knowing that we need more housing and that the commercial is probably not going to grow like that.
All right, we're now at 6:55. Well, thank you very much, Chris. Guys. Hold on a sec. All right. Next meeting will be Sunday, April 28th, 5:30. Whether it is Zoom only or hybrid like this is to be announced. If the COVID numbers are continue to be elevated, we'll be meet by Zoom only. We may, however, request attendees to show proof of a negative COVID test or wear a mask. But we will see you next month. Join us online at facebook.com/solidarityLowell, public events, photos, and more. You can join us in the Facebook group, facebook.com/group/solidarityLowell, participate in discussion. Visit our website, solidaritylowell.com. Follow our Instagram at solidaritylowell. Follow us on our X Twitter at solidaritylowell. And you can watch meeting recordings on YouTube or at LTC. Thank you for attending, and we'll see you next month.
Stop. Don't forget to stop recording.
Where is it?
Cross Point and the main towers were killed by the.
No, right here.
Works.
So far, no.
Really?
Well, here, do stop share first.
That's good.
Oh, maybe you can.
It says record.
They moved all the stuff around.
Yeah. Oh, I've got it.
I was